You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
So I recently took a phone call from one of my good, close personal friends from middle school, high school. We have the same birthday. This is a guy I've known forever. And the call was, hey, Sean, can you check the value of my home? We're thinking about listing. I want to get a really accurate list price. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you're selling your home. And he was like, yeah, my kid's school district has gone bonkers and we are moving to Boise, Idaho. I mean, this was not a long planned out move for this really good friend of mine. This was we're getting out of this school district. We're getting out of this state because this is nutso. And the school district was the Issaquah School District. And Jason Rantz from local news radio KTTH here in Seattle was featured on Fox. He's featured on Fox a fair amount because he covers topics that nobody else really does. I'll cover some of them. This one to me has some really personal connotations because I've had two people that I know of move out of the school district and specifically wanting to get their kids into a different school district without the kind of nonsense we've got going on in Issaquah. Issaquah is an Indian name and it's a city just to the, southeast of where I'm sitting. So it's just to the east of Bellevue. And it's a suburban kind of community. There's Interstate 90, goes right through Issaquah, goes right into downtown Seattle. It's maybe, it's a 15, 20 minute drive from Issaquah to Seattle. But their school board is just literally nutso. And they've gone down this really woke avenue. And you've got two people that I know of. My mortgage guy, Dan Chapman, indicated somebody that we both know that have worked in the industry forever, also moved their kid out of the high school, out of Issaquah High School, because of this kind of stuff going on. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about Jason Rantz calls out school board for allegedly holding segregated meetings. So maybe you've heard about this on Fox. I'm here to tell you from my perspective that I've got two people that I know of that I've known forever that literally move their kids out because of what's going on. So let's find out what's going on. Before we do, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, and some say that I read news for reasonable people. All right, let's do this. Issaquah. And I'd heard rumblings of Issaquah, the school district, let's be honest, it's basically a bunch of white people that have gotten so woke that they don't know what to do with themselves. And now we're at this position where the school board is holding segregated meetings. I mean, it's just kind of wild. So here's Jason Rantz. This is what he's saying. Apparently, this whole concept of separate but equal is not covered in critical race theory. So this controversy right now is unfolding in the Issaquah School District. It's just outside of Seattle. The school board is replacing a retiring superintendent, so they're holding different meetings to get input from parents. Kudos to them, except the meetings are meant to be racially segregated now. The first meeting is tomorrow night. It was labeled in part Meeting for Parents, Guardians of Color, which of course the translation is white parents need not show up. Go to the other meetings. Now, after hearing an earful from angry and offended parents at this last school board meeting, which by the way included parents of color, they got called out. School board then defends the separate but equal meeting. It's just this crazy thing going on. It's like, okay, we want everybody to feel comfortable, but in order to get there, you got to have everybody kind of work on the same topics together, not separate. And this story is literally separating people, and people that are close to me are leaving because they're not wanting to deal with how this is being handled. It's being handled in a way of, okay, in order to be inclusive, we need to be more divisive by having separate meetings. Now let's go hear what the school board has to say. This is what the school board has to say about said meeting.
It's not really a dialogue, it is input, but I do want to say a few words. I'm sorry for anybody who feels that was an indication of segregation. It was really an intent from the board to be able to hear from our historically marginalized families. We wanted to be able to have an environment where they could share freely and honestly and feel vulnerable. And so we have heard.
Have any of them complained? Any of the families being indicated here, have any of them complained about this being a thing? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. All right, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, let's just keep going.
Those families before, and we understand that sometimes the environment isn't comfortable. So having them surrounded by other people similar to them makes it easier. So our intent was to create a more welcoming an environment and to be more inclusive versus to exclude anyone.
But by doing so, excluding a ton of people. Okay. All right.
We did change our language on the wording. We listened to some people that have given us feedback. All of the meetings are open to any families to attend. And we invite you to either attend one or more of the focus group meetings or fill out the survey. But our intent is to be expansive and inclusive. So
they basically 100% backed off of, well, this meeting's just for families of color. In the end, that's kind of what they did. And that's what Jason Rantz is calling them out for. Now, this is kind of an indication of how crazy things have gotten in a school district in Seattle. This is suburban Seattle. And this is why people are leaving Washington State, particularly the west side of the mountains of the Cascade Mountains in Washington State. Because of stuff like this, they get called out and they're like, okay, instead of having a segregated meeting that's going to create more inclusivity, I mean, the whole concept there is, it's problematic, isn't it? So, and I understand if you're a family of color that has, doesn't feel comfortable, what do you do there? I'm not really sure, but from the standpoint of this school district doing what they've done, they obviously can't justify their actions. And so they're being called out, and they're even being called out by the families of color because, this isn't really a solution. We got to figure out how to work together here. And I think a lot of folks are saying Issaquah School District, and I've heard more than just from the couple of people I mentioned earlier, that this is not a school district that they want to be a part of. And, these are not crazy right-wing people. These are just average people that want to send their kids to a good school district. And historically, Issaquah used to be a good school district. Knew a lot of kids that went there. It's part of one of those schools that Bellevue High School, where my kids went, would compete against. We competed against them in baseball. I know the Issaquah community super well. I've appraised there for years and years and years. I've watched all those communities develop and grow over the years. And this is not a hotbed of racism. It's just not. But this is making it onto Fox News. This is how you get on Fox News, by doing this kind of stuff, where I think you're not really looking at the overall optics here of what you've got going on. Okay, so that was the school board basically kind of backing off of where they were. Yeah. So, and what percentage of the Issaquah School Board are families of color with kids of color? I don't know, but it's pretty small. I mean, it's pretty small. So it's not like this is split 50-50, right? And so you've got this massive kind of shift towards a different direction. And a lot of families are saying, hey, we want to be fair too. We want to be fair too. And we want this to be an inclusive environment for everybody. But you can't really do that when you basically say, yeah, white people, you need to stay home or you need to go to a different meeting. And that's where this breaks down, in my opinion. So here's what Jason Rantz says. So they're promoting inclusion and diversity by holding segregated meetings. Now the board has since changed their language, which we just heard. They're basically explaining why they're doing this way, but they say, well, anyone can go. All right. Yeah. So I had difficulty with that. It's like, okay, so all the even numbers today, all the even numbers, you guys are going to go south. And all the odd numbers, you guys, everybody with an odd, the other number, you're going to go north. You know what? Just go wherever you want. That whole deciding thing. Yeah. And let me get back to where Jason was. And this is Jason again. And while I don't necessarily believe they've actually heard from a bunch of marginalized families, and that was my first thought as well, is why is Issaquah, how did Issaquah get so woke? When did that happen? What happened there? Yeah. Interesting, right? And I have not, there hasn't been any news stories of marginalized families of color basically stating, we don't feel comfortable, therefore we'd like another meeting. If that was the case, be like, okay, so let's figure something out that makes sense. And we want everybody's opinion to be heard, and we want people to feel part of a community. But I don't know that that's ever, been a thing in Issaquah where people don't feel part of the community. Because Issaquah, all the communities around on the east side have become racially diverse. I am typically the only white dude at my grocery store in East Bellevue. And I'm okay with that. I'm a giant. I'm 6'1", and I am a giant in my own grocery store because I'm tall. Because the other communities that now are, a large part of East Bellevue, they're not tall. And so, and you know what? Nobody really thinks anything much of it. I pull in there. I'm like, I'm getting groceries, and they, other people getting groceries, and it's just what we're doing. So this whole thing where, all right, white guy, you can't attend this meeting because you're going to make them feel uncomfortable. I don't think that's really the case. I really don't. But okay, let's say that is, then we need to address it. And if we did have families that are being impacted by this, well, let's address that too. But you can't address that with two separate meetings. All right. So Jason says, I think we'd all say it's racist if white families want to segregate meetings because they felt uncomfortable around black families. So let's just call this what it is. It's racist. Well, I think the school board got the message, and they kind of went down this road as well and basically stated, okay, you know what? Let's just have everybody go to the meetings, which is, that's the way it should be. Figure it out together. Don't do this separation thing. Who came up with this idea anyway? Okay. And on the school board, for those of you on the podcast part of this, we have got 1, 2, 3. I think we've got 4 white people, and we've got 1 black gal, I believe. It's hard to tell. The feed, Issaquah. You need a better feed for your live streams of your board meetings. I know you can afford it. I know your tax base can afford it. So you get some expense. There are some expensive homes in Issaquah. It used to be kind of a bedroom community, and when Bellevue wasn't, fully built out the way it is now. When we still had infill going on in Bellevue, Issaquah was one of those communities where, it's kind of out there. Oh, you live in Issaquah? It's out there. Now it's a very desirable community. And one of the last homes that I was personally involved in selling was one of my younger brokers. His parents was selling just a standard tract home in a community called Klahani, which is, again, another Indian name. These are all Indian names because this used to be Indian territory. During the Civil War, this was literally Indian territory. And so you've got these bedroom communities. Homes are built. Oftentimes they're built in the mid-'80s. I was appraising there as a late teenager and early 20-something. I was appraising there all day long because it was new construction development. And I could go out there, take my time, not be rushed by a homeowner, wanting to know why I was so young and doing a job that had so much, influence on their loan, either being approved or not. So I was doing a lot of new construction. I did a lot of new construction in Issaquah. There's so many people in the mortgage industry here in the Pacific Northwest that can attest to that. So that's my background. And so I've watched these homes go from, I think they were in the mid to late 1980s. They started off at maybe 225, 225, something like that. And then now the last home that I was involved in at the beginning of the pandemic, we were going to list it literally, I think in March of 2020. Terrible timing, right? And so had a meeting with my brokers, the parents who were selling the home, and they were going to be retiring, and they were kind of making some plans. And we said, hey, let's put this on hold for a couple of months, which we did. And then once we kind of got used to the idea of the whole pandemic and that we were selling homes, and wow, there was a massive demand spike instead of a slowdown in the housing community. We listed the home in Issaquah. I think it was an Issaquah address, Issaquah community, Issaquah area. It's on the south end of the Pine Lake Plateau. Let's put it that way. So it is an Issaquah address, not Sammamish. So we listed the home for 8 something. We sold it for 9 something. And that home today, 2 years later, is probably worth 1.5. That's how fast that community has appreciated. And, a lot of communities across the United States have appreciated that fast as well. But this is a bedroom community with all kinds of employees commuting to Microsoft, commuting to Amazon. It's not that far. But it's not this racially segregated. I mean, it's not an area of high racial tension. You know what I mean? And yet you've got this woke school board that is like, well, we want everybody to feel comfortable. So we're going to have meeting for these folks and a meeting for these folks. And in my opinion, as a white privileged man, middle-aged man, I am the ultimate in white privilege. And I've talked with a lot of people of color about this. It's like, all right, so we got this going on and we got this going on. I'm a white dude. I'm the ultimate white male privilege. I own real estate companies. I'm a homeowner. You know what I mean? Not that I haven't had my struggles, but certainly not on the levels of what other members of the BIPOC community probably clearly have had. I don't know, what it's like to walk in their shoes, and they don't know what it's like to walk in my privileged, white old guy shoes. And so there's that. And I've had that conversation, and what it comes down to is you got to figure out how to make this go together. And what the Issaquah School Board has done is just basically divide things. So, I think Jason Rantz is correct in saying, hey, this is segregation. This is clearly segregation, and it probably wasn't intended, but the end result is something that you look at and you go, yeah, okay, well, yeah, that might have come from a place of trying to help out those who might feel marginalized in the community. But I don't think that's really a thing. If it was, and if it is, I'll report on it down the road. Hey, we're feeling this way because, this, and this has happened within our community. All right. I'm more than happy to cover that. But this is an example of a woke school board gone sideways. That's the bottom line. That's the way I see it. And I'm just going to call it the way I see it. And sometimes it's not the most popular of opinions, but when I know there's a lot of other people leaving a particular area, and it's Issaquah, and it's their high school, and it's their school district, and it's their school board. When you've got that kind of thing going on and it makes the Fox News, then you're like, what is the dealio there? Yeah, you got a bunch of woke people that are creating an environment that, that a lot of other folks don't agree with. And, the whole critical race theory thing, being heavily involved in the school district in Issaquah, things are going in those directions. So yeah, it was interesting on this one that the Issaquah School District basically did a complete about face and said, that whole thing about, some of you over there and you're not invited to this meeting. Don't show up. Your input on this one isn't, we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. That was their bottom line. And then there's enough kickback. And like Jason Rantz even says, enough kickback from those who are, being claimed by the school board to being impacted by this, where they're saying, hey, this isn't how this goes. This isn't what we should be doing. Wild times, right? I mean, it's so crazy. But in a state like Washington, this is what we're doing. This is what we're facing. This is what we're battling. And this is happening all across the United States. And so we've got these issues of things coming up. And why am I covering this on a real estate podcast? That's an interesting question. Well, it impacts where people want to live, right? It's a news story that's out there, and I have personal experience with it, and I wanted to share that. And so, that's kind of what I've done. But it impacts the perception. Real estate is all about optics. What is the perception of this community? What is the perception of this neighborhood? And well, now you've got these optics of a school board that doesn't know which way is up and is basically stating one thing and then backtracking. And, that's not a real image of stability if you're looking at sending your kids there. Hey, should we send our kids here? Oh, wow. What news stories do we have coming out of Issaquah School? Oh, they were the ones that had that going on. Okay, well, yeah, it's something that parents have to deal with. And I was thinking about this, and my kids are, they're in their mid to, getting beyond late 20s. I think my oldest turns either 28 or 29. No, I think maybe he turns 28. Maybe already, I don't know. I should know how old my kids are, right? But they're so old that I'm like, oh, yeah, how did we get here? Because I'm still 29, right? That's one of those things in your head where you're like, how did we get to 53? I don't really know. But here we are, got to deal with it. But my point is that, yeah, my oldest son, I think last year had his 10-year reunion for high school. And so I'm 10 years removed from my eldest being in high school. So I no longer have the community ties to high school. But this 10 years ago in Seattle, greater Seattle area, this wasn't a topic that was, widely being dealt with. We weren't having racially segregated meetings, or we weren't have proposed racially segregated meetings. That wasn't a thing. It's, and we dealt with a lot of different schools in the area. My kids went to a moderate sized high school. Bellevue is not particularly a huge community. It's not as big as some of these areas that have much larger high schools, but we still competed against them, and we had interactions with them. And I go to Issaquah. Issaquah has the headquarters for Costco. It's no longer in Kirkland, where the Kirkland brand kind of came from. But, Issaquah headquarters is in Costco, and there's a lot of cool stuff in Issaquah going on. It's right at the foothills to the Cascade Mountains. So it's kind of one of those, it's not like an outdoor, it's not a gateway to the outdoors, but it's right there. It's at the foothills of the mountain. So if you live in Issaquah, you've got like a 5-minute drive to some epic Cascade Mountain trails that, a lot of people compare to the Swiss Alps. No joke. They literally do. So from my office where I am sitting right now, I can do probably a 20-minute drive, be at West Tiger Mountain, number 4, climb that mountain in an hour and a half, maybe an hour, be down. And that's several thousand feet of elevation, overlook the city of Seattle. I mean, it's epic. And, you're in a mountain environment. And, that's the type of community that Issaquah is. And yeah, it's got this kind of stuff going on with a really woke school district and school board. And, you're going to have some issues there because not everybody is on board with that. So yeah, just some wild times here in the state of Washington. A lot of people harp on me for, well, why do you stay there? Why do you stay there? Get out of there. Leave there. Just get out and go. Yeah, there's podcast topics for days here in Seattle, right? I mean, I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to keep covering it. So, and this is where I grew up, and I have faith in it. I'm one of those glass half full kind of guys. All right, there's a shot all right, Seattle's got a new mayor. All right. I want to see things kind of turn around because, man, I was in Seattle yesterday, and some of the nonsense I saw there was just, I'd show you the video, but you'd be like, oh, good Lord. Oh, maybe I will show the video. We're kicking around some of those concepts as well. But, you know, you see people living in squalor in Seattle, and you're just like, okay, I was just in Bellevue, which is really nice. And now I'm in Seattle, and there's one area that I visit frequently is underneath a freeway system. It's on a super steep slope, super loud. You got a homeless community in there. There's garbage everywhere. You've got RVs lining the street. It's rough. It looks rough. It is rough. And this is where these people have been living there for a while. We had a white Volkswagen van just kind of get moved out of the area that had been, I think it had been abandoned for, I remember seeing it there for at least a year. So you've got these areas of Seattle that are just kind of, you know, they're rough. They're rough. And we allow our people to live in these conditions, and it's heartbreaking, and it's going to take a long time to turn around. These are not overnight conditions that a new mayor can come in and fix. Not going to happen. So be realistic about that. Not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You can sweep people, but from community to community, but it's going to take a long time. And dealing with, you know, woke stuff like the Issaquah School Board is, you know, what we've got going there. I mean, even if you're really accommodating, maybe you don't want your children to be in, you know, dealing with an environment where, why can't you guys go to that meeting? Well, we were uninvited. We got to go to this other one. You know, what kind of message is that sending? That's the thought that comes to me is, what kind of message is this sending? All right, white people over there, people of color over there. That is really, it's the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish, right? And yet somebody at the school board didn't really think about those kind of optics as far as what's going to go on here. How is this going to be perceived by the general community? Well, it made it on Fox News, you know? So I'm trying to bring my reasonable opinion to it and bring you my personal experiences with friends I've had leaving this community so that you can know, all right, yeah, that is a story. And okay, maybe that story sounds a little right-wingy, a little right-wingish, like, oh, yeah, yeah, really? Yeah, personal experience with it. And you just heard it here on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. News for reasonable people. That's all I got. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for supporting. I'll catch up with you soon. Bye for now.